Welcome. This is the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and general explorer of the service and experience space. The thing I'm really interested in is how do we create organizations that produce better outcomes for both their customers and their people. This podcast has been running since January 2011, and so we have a big archive to explore. Check out the archive at adrianswinscoe.com. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Natasha Ratanshi-Stein, who is the CEO and founder of Surfboard. How you doing, Natasha? Nice to have you on the podcast.
Great to be here. Really excited about it.
And so, Natasha, for the benefit of our listeners and also the folks that read some of the highlights I put together, can you tell me a little bit about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Adrian said, my name is Natasha. I'm Canadian originally, have lived in London for the last 15 years. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Surfboard. Surfboard provides simpler, smarter, and fairer workforce management for modern customer service teams. We're built for teams that are overcoming complexity as they scale, whether they're growing the number of people they have, whether they're working with BPOs, whether they're thinking about how to manage their team more effectively, and with AI becoming part of the puzzle as well as they implement AI and are thinking about that hybrid structure between humans and bots, being able to manage that more effectively as well.
Super. Now, we've known each other, or I've been talking to each other for a wee while now, and so I've followed your progress because workforce management is sort of an interesting but often not spotlighted sort of a space in the whole service and experience pantheon. Let's use a fancy word, shall we? And I was been looking for the opportunity to have you on the podcast because of some of the stuff that you're doing and how you're trying to do things slightly differently. But the opportunity came when you published a new ebook, a piece of research called Surfboard's 2024 Customer Service Survey, and the subtitle is The Third Wave of Customer Support. Now, I love a bit of research, couple of percentages that we can rummage around. That's always great. But before we get into some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about or dig into some of the few findings, I wanted to ask you to tell me a little bit about the report, some of the main headlines, and sort of who's it for and so why you did it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the third wave is something that we focus a lot on Surfboard, and we define the first wave of changing customer support as the first technology wave. And that was when two things happened in parallel. Number one, customer service teams moved from being predominantly telephony-based to moving towards omni-channel support. So introducing channels like email and chat, etc. That came concurrently with the migration from on-premise software to cloud software, which opened up a lot of opportunity for customer service teams. And then the second wave came really following the pandemic as customer service teams moved from being predominantly on-site to being able to move towards hybrid and remote structures, which also opened up more opportunities for geographically distributed teams with one central customer support headquarters being able to manage a team that was spread across the world. Now we're in the third wave, which I would say OpenAI and ChatGPT really unlocked for us, which is where customer service teams have begun adopting AI much more rapidly. And so the word hybrid, again, is being redefined, where hybrid isn't, necessarily just on-site or remote, but hybrid also refers to the structure of the team being partially humans and partially AI or bots. And so we conducted this report earlier this year just because we are going through that third wave. It's one of, the most important generational changes in the customer service space. And we see that a lot of customer service teams are looking to learn from each other in terms of that implementation, to learn from each other in terms of what priorities are most important, and to benchmark and compare performance and those priorities across one another. And so we sent the survey to our network, Surfboard customers, plus other teams that we're close to. We ended up getting over 100 responses to get this critical mass to understand how teams that are, like-minded, modern, are thinking about navigating the changes over the last year as well as the coming few years as well.
Perfect. Now, I wanted to dig into some of the findings because I think that just gives, obviously we don't tell people kind of everything about the report because you want to go download it and and find out for themselves. But I wanted to highlight a few of the things that I noticed in the report that I thought were interesting, and also based on kind of what you've kind of like said about you wanted to gather these insights from companies that you are and teams that you believe are sort of more. They're sort of leaning into sort of the new ways of working, new technologies, all these different things. But the first thing I wanted to ask about was that the report finds that nearly 31% of the customer service teams surveyed have not yet invested in AI capabilities. And I wanted to ask you why. Do you have, and why, if you have any insight, what might be stopping them? I mean, is that about cost? Is it about risk? Is it about understanding? Is it a bit like, we just want to go old school. We like the work. What is it?
It's a great question. So we were also quite curious about the results. So following the publication of the report, we actually had all of Surfboard's London-based customers or UK-based customers get together, and we really tried to understand their motivations and how they're thinking about AI, just to get a lot more of the nuance that this question alludes to. And so really what it came down to for many of the companies that we spoke to was how nascent AI still is. It's still very much in the early stages of development. And so the benefits aren't yet certain enough to justify the ROI in investing in AI. And so it wasn't necessarily the risk. It was more so, to what you say, the cost and the understanding. And so many companies that we speak to are resource constrained. They're battling numerous priorities. And with that, they need to know that they're getting their bang for their buck if they start asking their team to invest in, redefining their help centers, introducing new bots, training the AI, which takes time, and seeing where those results are going to come from. So I think where we see the teams that haven't yet invested in AI, majority of them, I think 54.5% of them said they will plan on investing in AI in the next year of the companies that haven't yet adopted it. So the majority is interested in AI. The majority wants to do it, but they're just waiting for that right inflection point for when they have the internal resources to be able to do it, but also when the AI is at a much more mature stage that justifies investing in that resource.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I saw something else today which said, and I can't remember the exact findings, but effectively what it basically said is if you, prior to all of the mist and the fog and the hoopla that it goes around, that here's what's really happening. And there's a lot of people that are standing on the sidelines going, happy to be a fast follower in this. This still feels, it's got a lot of promise, but it still feels very bleeding edge, despite all the kind of despite all the use cases in this and that and everything. There's a lot of people that are still being cautious about it because actually, as you rightly say, they are cost or resource constrained, and they have to think about where's the best place to put my pound or dollar or yen or euro or whatever it might be to maximize the ROI that I get. And that, I guess that speaks to some of the hesitancy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing I would just add that came out of the report that I was quite interested by, despite the fact that a lot of companies are going through cost constraints that have emerged over the last couple of years, is that 64% of the respondents said the biggest priority for their team still remains improving quality. And so I think when you think about the teams that haven't yet invested AI and combine that with the priority of improving quality, I think they haven't yet seen how AI directly contributes to improving quality. And so a lot of them are thinking more about things like how to do more quality assurance. A lot of them are thinking about improving their self-serve mechanisms. And so that investment really has to make sure it aligns with the company priorities, and where quality is the case, that's the direct link.
I mean, and to your point, I mean, it's, as is my want, I sometimes come across pieces of research that I trot out on probably a nauseating kind of like frequency, nauseating kind of like frequency. But one such piece of research that I came across recently was, I think this is from Gartner last month, which would be August 2024, and they said that they found that 73% of customers that they surveyed around the world said that they want to use self-service tools, right? So forget deflection and all that sort of stuff. People want to help themselves. They want to do that. That's kind of fine. The troubling finding There's only 14% of them were able to solve their problems using the self-service tools.
Yeah.
And when you drill into that, there's some light at the end of the tunnel, not much, but a little bit. When on the super, super simple stuff, that 14% goes up to about 30.
Yeah.
But it's still a long way off fulfilling people's expectations. And so I think that speaks to the thing around quality that you're talking about conception, design, execution, implementation, all these different sort of things. It just needs to be that quality needs to be lifted up across the boards.
Absolutely. And I think it really comes down to the providers that the customer service teams are using as well, right? There's some who just link into OpenAI and use their APIs. And it's not necessarily high enough quality that justifies seeing that quality improvement. You see other ones. I mean, the amount of money companies like Intercom or Dialpad are spending on AI investment, they're the ones that are AI native. And you do see a much higher adoption rate of AI and therefore a much better corresponding quality, because you also have that network effect or that self-fulfilling prophecy where the more of the customers adopt the AI, the better the training of the AI becomes, and then more customers will adopt it going forward.
Yeah. But also I guess related to the quality points, there was another finding in the research, and I was like, what? Because it said, and I want to understand, have I understood this correctly? Because, and particularly like you said, we've got these people these teams that are modern, and this must be modern in their outlook, I guess, because the report also found, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that nearly 29% of respondents state that they're supporting their customers without using any of the normal tools. Does that mean they're still in just inboxes? Shared inboxes?
No, that's a good question. Not inboxes. When we did the survey, I think we probably put a list of 10 to 15 tools, the most dominant ones that you would hear. And so then there was an other section, and it was the ones who clicked other. And as you see, the customer service industry and the software industry specifically is extremely fragmented.
Right.
And
okay.
Send a survey, you're not going to get everyone, but they weren't in the 15 most commonly heard ones.
Right. So they weren't kind of using the usual suspects, as it were.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify. I just thought again, you could be modern in your attitude, but not necessarily in kind of the tools that you're using. And I was a bit like, oh, that's an interesting kind of finding. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. So yeah, people are kind of using the right sort of tools, but actually it's a reflection on how fragmented the space is.
Exactly.
Okay. But then the report also then concludes that it says AI is enhancing, not replacing human roles in customer support. And I agree with that sort of idea. That feels to be the sentiment within the service and support space. But the report also finds that combined 40% of companies say that they will be reducing internal headcount and reducing reliance on BPOs in the next 12 months. And I wanted to understand, do you think that this might speak to the reality that some of these teams are under in terms of costs and investment kind of pressures, but also the way that people are still viewing service and contact centers?
I think the BPO question is very specific to the type of relationship an individual company has with their BPOs. Many companies view BPOs as a out of sight, out of mind way of handling customer service. And those are the ones that tend to have it more as a cost center.
Right.
For them, BPO management can be a large headache where they're constantly auditing. Have I actually gotten the number of hours that I've been told I'm getting? Is my CSAT or quality of service good enough from the BPO? How much internal bandwidth is it taking to train and level up the BPOs relative to the internal teams? And then you have other companies that we speak to who have great relationships with their BPOs, and it really is a partnership. Mm-hmm. They have their internal team, every time there's a new product release or changes to the, necessities of their customer service, they'll make sure the BPOs are upskilled and how to resolve those queries. The BPOs might not just be doing level 1 support, but getting into level 2 support and having access to the various systems to be able to fully resolve a query. And so I think that's the first dependency on the types of answers we get. I think the second part of it is how they think about the transformation of the work that their customer service is going to be doing in this post-AI world. And so if they think about the type of work becoming something that is improving quality, it is more profit maximizing, it is getting to the root cause of the problem, it is having customer service teams pivot a little bit to doing revenue retention, revenue generation via sales, etc., then they might deem it a little bit less appropriate to use BPOs, as they see that being a much more varied and hybrid role that sits internally. And so I think that's where the dependency comes in, and where it just depends on the type of structure that they see. But then you do have some companies that, as you allude to, are just looking at headcount. They're basically saying the ROI on investing in AI, I'm going to justify it to the leadership team by saying it's going to save us over the long term X% in headcount. And that headcount is first going to come from BPOs, just because BPOs typically will do level 1 support more often. And that's where they expect AI to deflect or resolve the queries. And then further down the line, if they're able to reduce more, then the first cut is going to come from the BPOs.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I think there's a lot of, I think that the outsourcing BPO space is a fast evolving space, and it's quickly moving from, there are people that's and players in there that they will get stuck on the service contract model, i.e., how many seats and how many minutes and how many resolutions can I sell? And that's going to be my core model. But actually, I think the ones that prosper are going to be the ones that lean into the partnership type of kind of model.
Absolutely. And we have one of our customers who has invested heavily in AI. They're an AI company themselves, and they've actually got their BPOs now working on annotations. Mm-hmm. So their BPOs will also audit the quality of the AI that their customers are seeing and iterate on it to make sure the AI gets better. So that's a really good example of a partnership where the internal mode of working or operating model has extended to their BPOs as well. And they've been able to find very high value work for their BPOs to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's an increasing trend in terms of people are outsourcing more and more things, and particularly things associated with that sort of space, plus also other areas. And I think you see it in smaller cases, but also at scale as well. When you have like large brands, that some of them are, I'm hearing more and more stories about brands that are moving to a core competency model of operation, where they're like, we're good at this, we're going to concentrate on being great at products, and then everything else we want somebody to be great at for us.
Yeah.
So I've seen that increasingly happen. But so this, I think we can agree, is that I think it's almost like an understatement to say this is a fast moving area, because sometimes it's mind boggling. I mean, you can refresh your page after 2 hours and there's something new that's kind of like that's happening. But what sort of, given that you're in the midst of it and you're seeing all these different sort of like, perspectives and different experiences from different types of clients, I mean, what sort of recommendations would you make to help customer service and support leaders get the most out of their sort of AI investments or investments in AI tooling?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my short answer would be expect to iterate a lot. Where we see customer service teams feel like they're falling short or find they're disappointed the most is when they earmark resource to make an upfront investment or do a batch of work. And then that resource then gets deployed somewhere else, or it goes back to what they were initially doing, and they're not able to iterate or continuously develop how they're using AI. And so the number of different use cases, whether it's post-call summaries, whether it's chatbots, whether it's parts of RPA, any of that, there's so many different improvements that are being made month on month, year on year by the providers themselves, that if a company really wants to get the most out of AI, they need to make sure they're constantly improving their internal resource, the technology that AI unlocks, their communications with customers on how they're using AI. And so given how quickly, as you say, AI is developing, the company's got to be prepared to respond as quickly as well in how they enhance and unlock the possibilities that AI gives them.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, it occurs to me a little bit like a supplementary question is to that would be, do you think that many companies are potentially getting caught out with the level of ongoing maintenance and development that is required to get the most out of some of these new tools that are kind of coming out? Because if you think about enterprise software or just business software, it's usually a case of, you'll go through do some research, you'll have a short list, you do some demos, you might put an RFP, you'll pick somebody and they'll have an onboarding, you do some customization and then you do some training and then you get started. And then there might be a few other tweaks along the kind of way, but generally it's like kind of like set it and leave it. And then you have periodic reviews that you kind of, or updates and things. Whereas that's completely different to some of this AI tooling where you're like going, oh, we can do all that sort of like stuff. And oh my word, there's a lot of work that needs to get done on a daily basis. And is that what's catching some people out?
100%. I think it's one of the first times where the onus or the burden of maintenance has shifted from being entirely on the vendor to split between the vendor and the customer. So the customer has to do a lot more work than what they previously would have been doing. So if you think about the deployment of like a CCaaS or a UCaaS provider, you typically have a lot of work up front, but then it's on cruise control and it's working, and the vendor will release updates and they'll handle scheduled maintenance and you'll just benefit from all the improvements that they do. But now the improvements really come from the customer themselves. It's really what they put in is what they get out. And when AI, I think, first made a big bang in customer service, a lot of customers that we had were caught off guard with how little they had invested in their help centers. So many of them hadn't updated their help centers for 3 years, 5 years. And then suddenly the AI is being trained on very stale data. And so that was the first example that we saw where they realized, oh, if we want this to work, we have to be continuously improving what we're putting in. And as they want those capabilities to expand beyond just training off a help center to getting much more deeper into their workflow, the amount of work they have to do on maintenance is going to continue to increase, which is something they have to be prepared for.
I mean, I would say that and maintenance is, in inverted commas, like a big term, because it's not just about, it's about testing and tweaking, but also about content generation. And even though some of these tools can help with that, there's also the idea that actually you've got to keep producing kind of new content, and that's for external use, but also kind of try and digitize kind of our repurpose existing internal sort of stuff, so you can drive both sides of the coin. And content generation is hard work.
It is, yes,
and takes a long time. And so that whole maintenance side of thing is when you actually start to lean into it and think about it, it's like, it comes to be a big deal. And maybe that, if we go right back to the very beginning, maybe that nearly 31% of service teams that haven't invested in AI capabilities, maybe it's because they've looked at it, they've opened the box and they've gone, oh, we need people to do this. Like, more than, we can't just have like somebody who's going to run a process and then big a tool and then plug it in. It's like, we need a team of people that are going to do this.
Yeah.
And that's the reality.
Totally. And often they want that capacity, especially if training the AI, to come out of their customer support headcount. And so then they have to assess the trade-off of what's going to happen to my backlog, what's going to happen to my SLAs if I suddenly take 10 people or 15 people out of core customer service and responding to inbounds, and have them work on this long-term investment. And for many of those teams, they're just not prepared to make that sacrifice given where their customer service priorities and metrics are at that point in time.
Awesome. That's really interesting. Fascinating, because it becomes a multidimensional kind of a problem. So I would say to people, yeah, you should definitely check out the surfboards, check out Surfboard, obviously, but also check out their support, the survey as well. I'll put a link in the description and the highlights and all this sort of stuff so people can easily find it. But Natasha, is there anything else that you'd like to add or highlight about the report that we've missed out before I can ask you some sort of wrap up kind of questions?
I think we covered a lot. I think just some highlight stats that I like to call out. I mentioned earlier that improving quality of service remains the top priority for customer service teams, despite the cost constraints we've seen. 39% of respondents did say reducing costs was their top priority. And interestingly, 19% did say hiring and retention of customer service agents remains their top priority. And so what I found quite fascinating about that is the hiring and retention often, if you think about it on a first principles basis, comes at odds with investing in AI because you're thinking about using technology, not humans. But I thought that stat of just being almost 20% showed how complementary AI and humans in handling customer service is. But then also when you think about AI, you do always want humans in the loop to make sure that it is in line with delivering that quality that's expected.
Absolutely. Perfect. So finally, a few quick fire questions before we finish up. Now, I know we talked about different sort of things, particularly around the survey, particularly about some of the stuff that you're doing and what you're seeing. And because of what you're seeing all sorts of different things, speak to all sorts of different people. I also like people to boil it all down because you know how people like a takeaway, right? And to help with that, I'm asking people to complete this sentence. And the sentence is, if you want to improve your customer or employee experience, Natasha says, do this. ... Complete that sentence.
Natasha says, interesting. Okay, I would say standardize is the word that comes to mind. Too often we see teams do it too late. As a customer service team, you're always scaling. Even if you're not scaling the number of people, you're scaling your processes, your product is scaling, the number of goods you might be offering is scaling. And that becomes much more challenging to serve customers if you haven't standardized in the early days.
Awesome. Brilliant. I don't think we've had standardized as a thing before, which is, I love it. A different angle. Now, it would be remiss of me not to ask a punk question, given this is the Punk CX podcast. And so what I'd like to do is ask you this: what company or brand do you think takes a punk approach to like servicing experience? Or what brand is an experience kind of leader and why?
So I'm actually going to give an answer of a sector I've been surprised with that has really evolved their experience, the banking sector. And I hadn't really interacted with the banking sector for a while. I always imagined it as extremely legacy in its approach. And you had these slight challengers like First Direct that weren't opening in-person branches, were doing everything via online and phone. And they had become, exceptional experiences for customers. And you saw that the approach First Direct took had forced the banking sector to change their model in terms of responding to phone queries faster, to being a lot more digitized. But then there were things that were still a nightmare, like you couldn't transfer money easily, you couldn't deposit checks easily. And then you had more challengers like Monzo, Revolut, Starling, etc. And they forced the banking sector as a whole to level up super quickly. And so when I think about what online banking, telephone banking, all of that looked like 5 years ago, and we're only talking 5 years, we're talking about 2 decades, and what it looks like today, I think that's an industry that I've been really impressed that has iterated really quickly. And so you would never hear me before raving about the experience of someone like HSBC or NatWest. And now you look at it and you're like, wow, this has really changed. It's really evolved. It's really not bad that I'm not forced to continuously complain and go to the ombudsman and look at alternatives. And so that's really impressed me.
I would echo that. I mean, what's interesting about First Direct, I remember years and years ago, actually on the podcast, having a chance to speak to the CEO of First Direct, I think just after they got acquired by HSBC. And then watching that sort of like space. And when they were acquired by HSBC, I think what was fascinating was that HSBC tried very hard to make them like them. Right. And then they realized as things shifted, actually, we need to be more like them.
Totally. Yeah.
And that's the kind of the thing that's kind of like shifted. And they've been a bit like going, oh, that thing, the service thing.
Absolutely. And look, I think that sector has been lucky that it's been held accountable by organizations like Which and the other comparison ones, because that's been forcing mechanism to make the likes of HSBC realize that data wins. And the data shows that the First Direct model is what is proving is working for customers and driving business, driving revenue.
Excellent. So the final question I have is, because recently I thought we should end on a good news story, because the world's weird and there's a lot of doom scrolling going on. And therefore, I've been trying to kind of ask people to share with me a good news story. So, Natasha, tell me what's the most interesting, positive, or exciting thing that you've seen in the last week? Or very simply, what have you seen that's made you smile?
This is extremely niche and specific to providing workforce management software. We recently introduced this metric called average interaction time and average conversation time. And we did that because we realized that a lot of our customers were getting frustrated that they didn't have an accurate grip of the average handle time or how long it was taking their teams to resolve queries coming from their customers. And what that made difficult was if they were thinking about, even what we're talking about, investing in AI versus the human capacity required, they weren't equipped with the data to be able to solve that. And when we released that metric, my expectation was that everyone's going to use it to reduce costs and think about how they can keep their headcount as slim as possible. And instead, the overwhelming response we got on that metric was that the customers that we were speaking to wanted to use it to ensure their agents or their team were fully resolving the customer queries. And so from average interaction time or average conversation time, they went into thinking, how do we enhance the customer experience? How do we make sure that our agents are using that time to fully grasp the problems, the account health, and get into the details of making sure that the experience the end customer is getting is as comprehensive, as full, as complete, as high quality as possible, instead of how do we keep speeding it up and creating this domino effect where they have a fast response, the customer's problem isn't fully resolved, the customer comes back, and that back and forth that you're getting. So that was a very niche answer. I don't know if that's what you're looking for in the grand scheme of what's happening in the world. I have to say, I've just had a baby. So I feel like personally, there's things like every time my baby starts smiling in its sleep.
Brilliant. So we can have a bit of a business thing, but a personal thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, so great. Thank you. That's great. I mean, I wanted to say thank you for anybody who's not picked up. It's Natasha is currently on paternity leave. At the time of recording, a few weeks ago, she gave birth to a son. So congratulations to you all, and welcome to the world, young man. So it's come out of paternity leave, or maternity leave. Paternity leave is the same thing, I guess. Well, it's leave.
Yes.
Has come out back from leave to do the podcast. So first of all, thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And thank you congratulations on the report. I think some really interesting stuff in there. I really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you for sharing your time and your insight and your expertise with me today. That's been awesome.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation, and look forward to chatting more about the topic.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. Do tune in again. Thanks very much.